All right, welcome to episode 3 of the We Are Not That Simple podcast, brought to you by Grace and Garfield Christian Reformed Church and Animated Concepts LLC. For this episode, wait, this is not episode 3, this is episode 4. I'm a lot farther than I thought. So for today, we have Mr. Ronald Berdell. How you doing today, Ronald?
I'm doing pretty good today.
Yeah. So Ronald, how long have you been in the neighborhood?
I think I've been here about 7 years now.
7 years? Where are you coming from?
Austin.
Austin. Okay, so still West Side, but
Oh,
from
yeah.
Austin to East Garfield. Did you grow up in Austin?
Yeah, born and raised in Austin.
Born and raised in Austin. What brought you over here?
Opportunity.
Opportunity.
I wanted to move closer to downtown, and this was the most affordable option.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things I love about the area: proximity to and ease to get anywhere in the city.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to move here, let me know. If you were to compare, so 7 years ago, that would have been what, 2014, 2015, around there?
Yeah, 2014.
Okay. What would you say the difference between where you grew up in Austin and over here, outside of just being closer to downtown?
Biggest difference, because my family's home in Austin is right behind the old Moon Oink.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up on the 4800 block of West Washington. Biggest difference is the lack of people.
Okay.
You know, that part of Austin, we had people move out. We had white people move out when I was a kid.
Okay.
And black people move in, but we didn't lose people.
Okay.
We still had, we might have had a few abandoned buildings, but most of the blocks were, from Cicero back to Austin, most of those blocks are like populated. There's people. And, when I came over here, the biggest thing that I had to try to get used to was less people and people seeming almost content with not having stuff. Like, we had Walgreens and they left and a bunch of Koreans moved into it and it was Dahlgreen. So it's like we lost stuff, but then
it gets replaced.
It was replaced. I didn't necessarily miss Walgreens. Then Walgreens came back in the 90s on Laramie and Madison. We used to have Buddy Bear. We didn't have Jewel left, and then we got Buddy Bear Grocery.
Okay.
So we had things that would replace what left. When I came here, I'm like, it's like nothing, and I had to like adjust to that not being there. And I'm like, why are you all content? That's almost the way I felt. Like, why are people content with nothing?
Yeah.
And then when you do bring something, some of the people in the area mistreat it so badly that it leaves. Because I just found out this week that the
Aldi closed down, yeah.
And I'm like, I said, well, 3 guesses why that left.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I said, well, I know they was dealing with a lot of theft. I also know that you were dealing with a lot of people you did not necessarily want to encounter.
Yeah.
Standing around and sometimes inside the Aldi.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because I've been watching like the online activity around that Aldi. And most of the conversation that I've seen on it, I try not to get involved, is trying to blame Aldi for leaving. Like, oh, they just don't like the area. And but when I talk to people, especially people that live here and are around here, especially people that have been here a long time, they're like, yeah, well, why would Aldi want to be here?
Right.
Considering this stuff. And so it's just weird to me that a lot of the public conversation, especially among the nonprofits that I've talked to that are involved in the area, is all like, Aldi is terrible for doing this, and they're kind of responsible for doing something else to replace it there. And I'm like, we need to like be better as a community to earn that type of business here. And sometimes I feel alone, especially when I'm looking online. And then I go talk to my neighbors, and I realize, no, there's a lot of us that kind of are thinking along that lines. But it's interesting to me because you talk about the area being empty, even in terms of residents. And if you look at the stats over the last 50 years, basically in 1980 the population in the neighborhood went down 10,000, 1990 another 10,000, and 2000s another 10,000, and none of those populations were replaced. It was just leaving each decade. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are aware of that, but there's a lot of disagreement on why that is. And I wonder what you think might be a reason why that is, that each year 10,000 people left the neighborhood net. So some people moved in, but there was still a loss of 10,000 people in total, 80s, 90s, 2000s. What do you think that a reason for that could be?
Well, being an African-American male that grew up on this side of town, I can tell you from my experience, people left because they didn't see opportunity here. They didn't see business thriving here. Like I have a brother that moved out to Bolingbrook. And a big part of why he moved out to Bolingbrook was he didn't want to deal with some of his neighbors in Austin. And so I think a lot of people left this neighborhood, because business left. It never recovered from the riots in the 60s when they literally burned down parts of the neighborhood. And I have my own conspiracy theories about that, but a lot of that desolates set in and was just never addressed in the last 60 years. And so people come here and they're like, well, I can't get my basic needs met. And then even if you can, there's so many former residents that come over here and commit all kind of crime that you don't want to deal with them. You know, I've had my own situations with people who have been indignant with me, and I'm like, you don't live on this block.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a real interesting thing, because I find that there is a rush to try to defend some of the nonsense that goes on. And I always have to remind people, most of the people doing nonsense aren't from here.
No.
They maybe lived here once upon a time or got friends here, but a lot of them don't live here.
No. No. I call them nomads. So what they do, they drive out to some place I found out was Aurora, Harvey, Dixmoor, Maywood, Bellwood. Go to the house they stay in, then come here and treat basically our whole neighborhood like a nightclub. Throw all their trash everywhere, then get in the car and drive out to the suburbs where they're staying, where they don't have to worry about blowback from some of the things they do in the city. So I think a big part of it is just the culture that was allowed to develop. You know, this whole drug culture we have in our community is ridiculous, and it chases people away. Nobody wants to come outside and see somebody OD'd on their grass every morning. And the lack of basic services, the amount of crime we're dealing with. You know, there's hardly any business that can breathe over here. Because even if you do open a business, you have to constantly worry about somebody trying to rob your business. And 9 times out of 10, if you're black, 9 times out of 10, they look just like you. And you're wondering why you robbing me because you're both black.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what do you think can be done? I mean, you and I have had conversations a lot about trying to do development in the community, both residential, commercial. What are some things that you think could be helpful towards that end? Because it becomes cyclical, right? It's like the businesses don't want to come here because of the condition, but the condition is there because no businesses are here. And so how do we break that cycle?
Well, first you got to realize it's a cycle.
Okay.
Second, we're going to have to do some things that's going to be uncomfortable for some people. And what I mean by that, we're going to have to really start enforcing the rules that's on the books in the city of Chicago. I mean, you're not supposed to litter. Enforce that.
Yeah.
If you're standing in front of someone's business and you're not doing business, you need to be moved along.
Yeah.
And we also need to encourage home ownership. We are high rental.
Yeah.
When we look at the percentages, I think, what are we, 70% rental?
I think so.
70 or higher. And we have to shift that to where it's more 50-50.
Yeah.
So any new development that comes in does not need to be rental.
Yeah.
In fact, we need to redevelop the rental we have already so we can incorporate retail at the bottom, rental at the top. And any new developments coming down, especially residential blocks, need to be single family or townhouse, where we can encourage people who are going to be more permanent to come.
Yeah.
Right now, we're a very transient neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem, because we really don't have a lot of control on who comes, and then we have an overabundance of a demographic. I'm not saying I'm against people who are low income. I'm not against that, but we can't base an entire neighborhood just on low income people. This is the outcome of doing that.
Yeah.
Austin, my old neighborhood, there's a whole swath of people there. Yeah, there's a lot of low-income people in Austin, but Austin by population is the largest neighborhood in Chicago and area. So you have people that are broke. You got people that get up and work every day. You got people that's middle class. You got every income level in Austin. That's why Austin is more sustainable. That's why the mayor of Chicago is doing more with that Invest West in Austin, because there's already structure, there's already a backbone. Here we don't necessarily have a backbone, but North Lawndale does.
Yeah.
So I would say, look at what North Lawndale is doing. Look at what Bronzeville did over the last 30 years, because we're more like the low end, as they call it over there.
Yeah.
What the low end was probably in the 80s and 90s, where there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to, I know people are like, oh, gentrification. Well, you know what? The real reality is we live in a city of many people. And the people that are willing to come in and try to make the neighborhood better may not necessarily look like me. But you need to embrace them, because when they're coming in, that's going to bring a different thought process, a different culture. There's some people that are so wrapped in the culture of hurt, they can't see what we see. Like Cabrini Green. Who would have thought there'd be $1 million townhouses built there? But had the drug dealers at the time gave their cousin, who's legitimate, the money to buy some of that land, they'd be multimillionaires right now. And that's the thing. We need to. I hate to use the criminal element, but I'm like, some of the criminal element need to invest in some of the people here.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like,
I always say that's one of the differences between like the Italian mob and the Irish mob and the Russian mob and every other mob that there is a lot of it was very their own community focused and building that up. And it seems like in our community, and I would say it's similar in the Puerto Rican community in terms of the crime, is that it was never, well, maybe in the 70s, back in the day, in the early instances of the gangs, it was about kind of almost like community watch. But then once the drug trade came in, it was like, well, I don't care. Because I remember having a conversation when I first started selling real estate with a guy. I was selling a building for like $45,000. This would have been 2014. So a lot of the stuff had bottomed out. This was in West Garfield. And I was having a conversation with the drug dealers on the corner. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you guys make enough cash in a week that you could buy this house. And then y'all could live for free or whatever. And you can start making your money clean. And getting into this business. I mean, a lot of the business concepts that you're learning as a drug dealer apply in the legit world. And if you're willing to hustle out here for 13, 14 hours a day, and you put that into something better, but there was and they understood. Like, they weren't like, oh, you're crazy or whatever. But it's a mindset,
Exactly.
That's been hard to... And that's hard to navigate.
Some of these guys out on the street, man, they don't realize they're a CEO. They have the same skill set, same tenacity, same drive that these people that are running multi-billion-dollar companies and would dominate. If we could move them to that, they would dominate. They would kill. And
that's the tricky part. And like you said, I think you said something really good about enforcing the rules, because that's the one difference is that in the legal world you have to be able to play by the rules, or at least pretend.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there are some corrupt aspects in the business world, but you got to be able to fake it. Like, before we got on here, I was telling you about my tenant that I had to get rid of. And it's like, that's somebody that has potential, but refused to get in line with what his responsibilities were, and leaves me with no option but, okay, you've become dangerous to the community around you. You have to go, and I have to get somebody to occupy that space, and hopefully they will be someone who's not a danger to the community. And I don't think that's a lot to ask. Like, for a landlord to say... No. I don't want you to be dangerous or to bring down the community. No. You don't have to bring it up, per se. Live your life. Do what you got to do. But once you start bringing dangerous elements over here... Well,
I'm going to borrow a line from Basketball Housewives, Evan Lazota. I'm going to paraphrase.
Okay.
Be a non-effing factor.
Yeah.
Be a non-factor, and I'm good with you.
Yeah.
We had, even on my block, we've had several shootings on my block, and we just really had to really push to get that particular set of young men to find somewhere else to be. And one of the things I wanted my neighbors to understand, there's a cutoff point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people, they look at them, they still see them as babies, they want to help them. True, but there's a certain line. Once you cross that line, I'm not trying to help you anymore. I'm trying to help you move on to where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you need to go to prison, well, that's on you.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be right here because I can get murdered because of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a light thing.
Yeah.
And I understand that you had bad breaks, but everything's a choice.
Yeah.
You're choosing to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah, and it may be a hard choice, but it's still a choice.
You're choosing.
And I think that is an interesting concept because I think that so many people are like, well, because of where you come from, your choices are limited or your choices are harder. And that is very true, but that doesn't make them impossible. I mean, some of the best stories that we have, the most inspiring stories are the people that come from the worst of the worst and come out on top. And I think we ought to encourage, especially young people, take on the difficulty.
Well, the other thing, too, I've actually watched, the head guy take people's children and screw their life up. Mm-hmm. And I realize it's a pyramid scheme. So I compare some of the gang leaders to terrorist leaders. Mm-hmm. Terrorist leader never is the one with the suicide vest.
Yeah.
So I realize it's a pyramid scheme. I got to keep this disposable workforce out here so I don't have to stand out here and get shot at or arrested. I'm going to indoctrinate you with this gang culture, with the life, to make you feel like you belong. Because I see that, you don't feel like you belong somewhere, you belong with me.
Yeah.
I'm going to indoctrinate you with all of this loyalty, which I'm not going to really have to you because to me, you're still expendable.
Yeah.
And once I kind of saw that and I saw him do that for several years, this guy I grew up with. Mm-hmm. I'm like, so it's a pyramid scheme. Yeah. It's only a couple of you going to be on the high end of this pyramid. So every 6 months to every 3 years, you changing out your workforce because they get
locked up, killed,
locked up, or strung out, and that's the other option. That you become your best customer.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, so all of this is to benefit you. Mm-hmm. And I think what a lot of young people don't understand, because they're victims, and that we have predators in our community that do that to other people's children, but won't do it to their own. Mm-hmm. I've seen this guy send his kid to private school, and I'm like, really? Your kid not out? Mafia, I raised you up in this. And I can kind of respect that. It's a family business, but your kid is going to private school, and you got kids his age out here doing this mess. And so my personally, I have a loathing for you because I can't believe you're destroying people that look like us. Mm-hmm. Not to sound racist, I'm like, I could almost stomach it if you was doing with people that wasn't black, but I'm like, I'm black, you black, the kids you're doing this to are black. Why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that has always bothered me. I mean, because it's very similar in the Puerto Rican community. It's just like, you talk all this mess about, our people having difficulty, our people, and you're doing the same thing that you're accusing everybody else of doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it goes for the violent stuff. It goes for the racism. Like, I remember talking with a Puerto Rican friend I grew up with, helping her buy a home. And I said, well, why don't you go back to Logan Square and buy a house there? That's where we grew up. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be around those people. And this is somebody that's like activist minded. Like, wow. If she heard a white person say that same exact phrase, she'd be livid. And it's just like, but that is actually commonplace, I feel like. That there's this idea that, well, I want everybody to care about us as if we're a united community. But for me, I'm in it for myself. I gotta take care of me and mine.
Right.
And it's like, you can't have it both ways. You gotta pick one. Either you're you and you're okay with other people looking out for themselves, or we're all in this together. But you can't pick and choose. But I did want to ask you, because last time I saw you was on a Zoom call where we were talking with people from the police department about what was going on our areas. How has your working with the police department, local police department, how has that been?
It took me a while to realize CPD is a big entity, And a lot of times when we're frustrated with CPD, the analogy I'll use is your body. A lot of us get frustrated because we don't feel like they're responding quick enough. But what I learned was if you're yelling at the foot, the ear can't hear you. So what I've done, I've built relationships with different officers at different ranks, different levels. So some lieutenants there know me, some of the sergeants, most of the police officers in CAP, some of the officers, some of the beat officers know me. The commander knows me, and I've gradually gotten to build relationship with them. And so now I don't yell at the foot anymore. I whisper in the ear. That's a good way to put it. And so it took me years to get that. It didn't happen overnight. And so that relationship has helped with dealing with some of the foolishness that we're running into. Like we had someone jumping in my neighbor's yards trying to steal stuff, and we was able to kill that right away. We had people dumping stolen cars over by us, I guess, to go do some dirt later on, and we've been able to kill that real quick. Yeah. Because of the different officers I know, and just saying, hey, this, that, and others happening. They're like, oh, really? Then they'll come show up. And so I think the big thing for me, the way that's worked for me, is that it took me time to build relationships. Yeah. But then, sometimes I'll get them a call and I'll just talk to them about, hey, what you eat for dinner?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's good, the whole building relationship aspect of it. Because, we've seen each other at a lot of the community meetings for all the different community organizations. So I feel like over here, there's 1,000 different organizations trying to help with something. I'm just like, to a certain degree, I kind of feel the same thing about the residents as I do about the organizations. There's 1,000 of you, and we're in the same state that we were 7 years ago. Some of y'all got to go. Or you're not going to get my time, at least.
What I learned, some people in college, I took the class called the Logic of Arguments. Okay. And one of the things that stuck with me is the concept of arguing in a circle. From that concept, I've learned very quickly: are you arguing just to argue, or are you trying to find a resolution? And so, what I've done with a lot of people you're naming, I'll engage in a conversation with you, and I'm listening to your responses, and your responses tell me if you're really trying to find an answer, or you're just standing here, you want to just flap your gums and just argue. Because some people are so wrapped in hurt. Yeah. And what has transpired, and the reality is, most of the people you're talking about have either moved on, dead, or not the new people that moved in. Yeah. Even on my block, there's new people that have moved in who don't have any attachment to what has happened before. Yeah. And what people who are here got to realize is that we understand that was reality, but that's not the reality for us coming in. And we're not seeing it that way. Just like having the Breakthrough Ministries have the Familyplex built. That's a big win. Having, whatchamacallit, the, not food pantry, food incubator.
Yeah, the hatchery.
The hatchery. That's a big win. That's like unheard of. The fact that it actually went up and it's actually functioning.
Yeah, I do find that a lot of people, instead of commenting on what the hatchery is, what are the potential benefits, or same thing with the Familyplex, there's a lot of people that have the conversation about what it isn't. And like, well, it's not doing this and it's not doing that. I'm like, it's true. There are a lot of things that it's not doing and that it's not going to do, and it's probably will never do. And some of those things might be things that they tried to sell themselves as. But it's still something that wasn't there before. It's still a step in a positive direction. It's better to have that beautiful building there that may or may not be contributing to jobs. Even if it created no jobs, it's at least not a huge empty lot anymore.
But, my pushback for a lot of the people that say stuff like that, I said, well, it sounds like you found an area of growth. So perhaps you want to lead the initiative on that. And so what I realize is that people that argue in a circle do not want to take initiative on anything. They simply just want to complain. So once you figure out, oh, that's what you're going to do, well, like Barack Obama did with McCain, I'm gonna turn the page at this point. I'm gonna start talking about what I'm gonna do because standing here debating with you isn't really that fruitful. He did the same thing to Hillary Clinton. If you noticed in his debates, after a while he turned the page and he just started talking about this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah,
this is the plan going forward. Because sitting here, you're not coming up with any resolution. And so once I realized that that's kind of the way, kind of what you're going to do, I realized, well, I need to move on from you and find somebody that wants to
grow together. Yeah, and I mean that's a big part of why I'm doing this. That's a big part of what I do. As I feel like building real, authentic relationships in the community, us getting to know each other more. Not the people that necessarily we wish were still here, or the people that we want to be here, but the people that are here. We all may have different views or whatever, but we're neighbors. So let's figure something out.
And that's what's, if you, Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that's habit number 6, synergy. We don't have to like everyone we're running across, but everyone has their own genius and everyone brings something to the table. And then all of what we're bringing to the table is the answer. A lot of people get so caught up in trying to win. My idea is better than your idea. I'm like, no, it's another idea that if I add this to this big picture, it can help solve this problem. I'm just telling you what I want to do. But some people, they get caught, that's habit number 4, think win-win. Some people get into that thinking of win-lose. In order for them to win, you have to lose.
Yeah.
And that's a very American concept. But that's for sporting events.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up earlier the idea of the body, which I think is a beautiful analogy. This is part of why it's used so often in the Bible to refer to what the church is supposed to be. I got to pull out the pastor stuff every now and then. But it's this idea that there's parts of my body that I'm not happy with.
Right.
I don't want to lose, like my left hand is not nearly as capable as my right hand. That doesn't mean I want to lose my left hand. Exactly. It means I'm frustrated with it sometimes, and maybe I want to make it better. But I need to be able to accomplish things. I need to be able to utilize my entire body and try to make healthy even the parts of my body that I'm not the most fond of. And if we think of people, like even communities, in that body sense, that every now and then I need to get a haircut. Every now and then I need to clip my nails because those are dead parts of my body. But overall, I need to take care of all the parts of my body, not just my favorite parts. And I do think that's part of why the Bible has endured, because there's very pertinent, truthful ways of looking at the world. I think the human body is, there's a lot to think about there.
And then some, I hate to put this, it's not a negative connotation. It's how you look at it. Some people can be considered cancer in our body.
Yeah.
But cancer in the right environment can be beneficial.
Yeah, because what is cancer? Was pretty much like an overgrowth of cells, right?
Correct.
So it's just an unhealthy growth in that way. So yeah, I think that's
so if you cut
a
it
real
out,
metaphor.
If I take it out of this one body, it might be beneficial somewhere else. And so when people look at gentrification, we're going to get pushed out. No. If you own your property, that means you're going to get a payday. You might be able to move back down to Mississippi, where your family came from, and buy a couple acres now instead of having a shack.
Yeah, because everything changes. It's about, is that change beneficial? There's this trend that happened with Humboldt Park that in the Puerto Rican community. Because I grew up in Humboldt Park when it was being gentrified, and actually left because we couldn't afford to live there anymore. But it was interesting that a lot of Puerto Ricans that came to Chicago didn't want to stay in Chicago. They were planning to work, save up money, and go back to Puerto Rico and buy a home. And so they rented here, not because they couldn't afford or because they didn't know. It was because they were planning to go back, but then never did. And then they raised kids on renting. And so you had Humboldt Park, which was a dominantly Puerto Rican area, where nobody, even though it was dominantly Puerto Rican, a small percentage of the population owned. And so gentrification just came through and happened, but it wasn't necessarily the fault of the people moving in. And it was the fault of the people who didn't buy, but not because they were just being stupid. It was because they were planning to go back to PR, and it just never came to fruition. And so people are trying to find somebody to blame, And sometimes it's not about blame.
No.
Sometimes it's just it's the way it worked out.
It's mindset. Like, to me, if you wanted to buy in the city of Chicago where it's affordable, you'd have to either, like East Garfield Park 7 years ago was super affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to have vision. So when I looked at it, I said, ooh, they ran out of room in West Loop. I didn't necessarily want to move further west. I said, well, I kind of want to move a little closer to downtown. I said, ooh, East Garfield Park. Yeah, it's a little rough, but I'm not indifferent to that. Mm-hmm. Just the difference is, the stick-up man, I didn't grow up with him.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Like in Austin, the guy that would stick me up, I knew him. So
yeah.
It's like, come on, man, here's $5, man. Stop playing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's somebody I knew. Most of the gang members, I knew him because I used to play stickball with them.
Yeah.
So it was different. But, I come over here and it's such a small microcosm, and they're not very welcoming of people. But I know why, because they're so used to people getting up and running.
Yeah.
But when they see that you're not gonna leave, because I've had people smash all the windows in my house. I've had people point guns in my face. I've had a lot of crazy happen to me. And I guess when they realize, oh, you are from West, I'm like, yeah, and you ain't the dudes that would murk me.
Yeah.
I know the guys that would do the dirty like that. I grew up with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it's interesting because 7 years ago, that's when I first got licensed in real estate. I was teaching. And, I would hang out with a lot of teachers that grew up over here while I was living over here. And I was like, man, y'all got to buy over here. It was black and brown. And why the hell would I want to go live there? I grew up there. I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to, move up, and that whole mentality. And I found that it was really rare for me to be able to sell over here to people of color. It was really easy for me to sell to white people. Because for white people, it was like, oh, it's an investment, and yeah, it's rough, but we can deal with that for a while or whatever. We can make that work. But the financial aspect, but I couldn't, it was so difficult to try to get like my peers, my Puerto Rican friends, my black friends to want to move over here. Some of them wouldn't even want to come visit me.
And a big part of that is their perception, what they've known about what's happened and that's why I said, it's easier for new people who don't know to come in because they're not looking at it the way that they're looking at it. I looked at it like potential. Because I looked at Cabrini, and I looked at West Loop, I looked at Humboldt Park, I looked at Logan Square. And when I explained, my wife's not from here, she's from Bermuda. When I was explaining to her, I said, man, Wicker Park, Logan Square, even Lincoln Park sucked. All of them sucked at some point in time. I said, that's where the Valentine's Day massacre with Al Capone happened in Lincoln Park. She said, really? I said, yeah. I said, all of those are crappy places, but they're gentrified. And one of the things I say to everyone that'll listen to me who's a property owner, like, oh, I'm going to get pushed out. I'm like, no, there are ways to insulate yourself. Now, maybe your children might have to pay the real money, but guess what? They're adults. If you have a 3-flat building and everybody's working, you all can pay the property taxes together. I said, we got to get out of this thinking of victim. You're not a victim. It means you have a different set of choices that other people won't have. Now, people that are renting, I tell them, if you're renting from a private owner, then you need to sit down and have a talk with that private owner. You got to do more now. And what I mean by that, hey, I'm only paying $800, but the owner can ask $2,000. Well, guess what? Instead of you asking that $2,000, how about I cut the grass? How about I shovel the snow? How about when you need someone to service the building, I'm the one that's letting them in? Because guess what? For that owner, that means they have to come up with less money. I've been a property owner before, and that's what I tell people. I said, go sit there and talk to your landlord.
Yeah. You can negotiate something. Yeah.
And I said, he'll probably say, oh yeah, I'll keep your rent the same. Just do that for me, because that makes their life easier. But you have to you have to change your mindset. And the people that don't want to change their mindset, well, maybe you do need to move, because that's not who's coming in. And the reason a lot of us leave is because of that mindset I'm talking about. That's why my brother left and went to Bolingbrook. That's why my cousin that's in the Navy probably not ever going to come back. Because he doesn't want to deal with that mindset. And the hardest thing to do is to get people to change their mindset. So to a degree, gentrification does have to happen to revitalize the neighborhood because some people will never ever see it for what it can be.
Yeah.
They are so ingrained in what they
Yeah.
presently perceive. Because to me, I don't presently perceive that because I'm like, since when does Family Dollar get burnt up and then reopened with all new stuff? Since when does Dollar Tree get looted and torched and they bring it back? That doesn't happen on this side of town.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, so it's other developments going on. And one of the big things that people have got to do, plug yourself into what's coming in. The internet is a wonderful thing. And a lot of us just use it for entertainment. But if you really use it for its original purpose, to get information. When people are like, oh, I didn't know about this. I'm like, I bet if a cop was choking somebody on social media, you would know about it.
Yep.
All the things that are coming to this neighborhood is on the internet. Or grab your friend that knows things coming in. Like, there's things I know that's coming in. And it's only because I've kind of plugged myself into some of these organizations as a contact.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it seems like some of the people, like, if you're a renter, it's this idea, oh, there's all this stuff coming, we need to stop it from coming.
No.
And it's like, no, you can't stop it from coming. Unfortunately, if you don't really have a lot of choice about that, but you can figure out a way to capitalize on it.
Exactly.
And that's why I try to, when I was teaching and involved with a lot of young people, is there are certain forces that you may not like, but you can't stop. But you can figure, it's like gravity. I don't like gravity when I'm on a rooftop. Right. But I can do things to keep me from having to deal with gravity. Or, if you learn how to fly airplane, you figure out how to harness that for good. That doesn't make it any less dangerous. Or
look at it like a wave. I don't know how to surf, but if I see a wave coming and you gave me a surfboard, I bet I'll figure out something.
And then you end up learning to enjoy that thing that you were trying to resist, if that makes sense. But I know I got to be sensitive of your time. I am very thankful that you came on. For those of you that are watching, if you like this content, you like to hear from people in the neighborhood, please like and share. And again, it's Pastor Mo coming from Grace and Garfield Christian Reformed Church. This is Ronald Berdell. You'll see him around once they allow us to start meeting more often. Thank you, and we'll be in touch.